Okay, so you should have your social studies text. You should have your graphic organizer. Flip to the second page. And document 1 and document 2. Everybody has those, right? Okay. So before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about the writing prompt, what you're going to be expected to be writing about at the end of all of this reading and researching. Your writing prompt is what really happened at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Describe the events as you saw them as either an American or British soldier. Be sure to cite evidence from the resources you used this week. The catch is that you don't know if you're going to be an American soldier or a British soldier. I haven't told you yet. So as you are building your background knowledge of the Battle of Bunker Hill, and as you are looking at different perspectives of the battle, you want to keep this in the back of your head. What really happened at the battle? Think about the events. But you're going to be having to think about them as either from the perspective of a British soldier or the perspective of an American soldier. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the background knowledge that we've built on Monday and Tuesday. What was the first thing that we looked at?
The video and the book and the painting.
Okay, so we had the video,
Yeah.
the social studies text, the King George excerpt, and the painting, The Battle of Bunkers Hill. Okay, so what have we learned from all of those things?
Where it was.
Okay, where the battle took place. Where did it take place?
Like the guy.
Martine, where did it take place?
Bunkers Hill.
Okay, on Bunkers Hill. What else did we learn, Colby?
When it happened.
When it happened.
Why it happened?
Why did it happen?
Because they were both fighting for Boston Harbor, and if they controlled the Boston Harbor, then they controlled the colonies.
So who? If who controlled Boston Harbor, then they controlled the colonies.
The British and
The British.
the Americans.
Okay. What else have we learned?
Who won the battle?
Who won?
The British.
Okay, Emily, why did the British win?
Because the Americans ran out of ammo.
Americans ran out of ammo. Colby?
And the British had more people. There were more than 2,000 people. They had more than 2,000 people.
Okay, so Melvin, you want to carry on with that? Why did the Americans lose that battle?
Because they ran out of ammunition and they were outnumbered.
Okay. So lack of ammunition, lack of troops, lack of effort
Yeah.
on the Americans' part?
Yep.
No.
No.
No, why?
Because they built a fort overnight.
Okay, so the Americans built a fort overnight while the British were doing what?
Sleeping.
Sleeping.
Being lazy.
Okay, so we said it was kind of lazy on the British troops' part, right? Okay. So what else showed that heart of the American soldier?
That.
Esmeralda? They were really fighting for freedom. Okay, so they built a fort overnight. They were really fighting for freedom. What else helped build the confidence of the American army after that battle? Arleth? Teamwork. Okay. What else? Jason?
They were proud of the way they fought.
Proud of the way they fought. Why would they be proud of the way that they fought in a battle that they lost?
Because they
Carlos?
So they killed many of their troops and wounded them.
Killed many of whose troops?
Of the British, because there were like more than 1,000 that they killed and wounded. And the British already killed or wounded like 400 patriots.
Okay, so considering that they lost this battle, in a way it was kind of a victory for the American troops. Built their confidence. So today what you're going to do is you're going to spend quite a bit of time working in your groups today with document 1 and document 2. You've read it a couple of times to yourself. I've done a fluent read. We've talked about some of the vocabulary words that you would not be able to figure out from the context of the text that they're in. And you have your graphic organizer, all right? There is no writing in the graphic organizer until you have had a discussion with your group first, okay? So let's turn to your graphic organizer. I want to go over those 4 questions that you are going to be filling out on both of those documents today. So document number 1 is we have Francis Bailey's summary. Remember, it's not Francis Bailey's summary. Who is Francis Bailey? The printer. He was the one who printed it, okay? So we're going to look at document number 1. The printing by Francis Bailey. So those 4 things that you're going to be discussing in your group, so discuss one of them, have a good conversation, cite evidence from the text, and then take some time to fill out your graphic organizer. So the first one, what observations can you make about the document? You've had a couple of times reading it, you've listened to it, go back and skim it, pull some things out. What are some things that really stand out to you? What stick out in your mind when you read it? The second one, from whose perspective is the document written? Is it a British perspective or is it an American perspective? How do you know? Don't just leave it as, oh, it's an American writing this. How do you know? What were some things that they wrote that led you to believe that it's an American perspective or a British perspective? Number 3, does this tell the complete story of the battle, only a piece of it, or just one side? Okay, so you really got to examine those documents. The whole battle, just a snapshot of it, like the painting that we looked at, or is it one side of the story? Who would the sides be? Whose side would it be telling the story? What are some possibilities?
British.
A British side or
The American.
an American side, right? Mm-hmm. And then your 4th one, let's go back to that 3rd one. If you tell me it's the complete story, or if you tell me it's only a side or a piece of it, you need to give me reasons why it's not the whole story, or if it is the whole story. Number 4, what piece or side of the battle is missing? Okay, so you can do that for document number 1, Francis Bailey's summary, and then on the back, John Howe's overview of the battle. Okay, questions on what we're doing? All right, so what 2 documents are we looking at?
Francis Bailey and summary.
And the summary. So we got document 1 and 2. What are we filling out? The graphic organizer. And what are we doing before we start writing? Reading and talking in your groups. Okay. Would you like highlighters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll bring you highlighters. Okay. And then I think I'm going to stop you in about 15-20 minutes just to kind of see where we are with that first document. Okay. Keep in mind your writing prompt.
Okay.
The events of the battle. Okay, and being able to tell it from both sides. Okay? We good? Okay, I'll get you highlighters and you guys can go ahead and get started with your organizers.
Okay.
Which means you can talk to each other.
Francis Bailey's number 1. This one.
Observations about the document.
You don't need
It
that.
talked about the fort,
need this
like
right now.
the Patriots had.
Going over number 1
The microphone's gonna hear us,
and
guys.
filling this out. Okay?
Okay, Francis Bailey. It talks about the fort and the American army and the British and the goods watchmen, groups of the guns cannons. Cause it says that with 400 of us forced and neatly repaired to pull up the post of the rail fence and carried the post rail to another fence, but then together for the breastwork With a fort.
So what are you talking about? What observations you made, or what jumped out at you?
Yeah.
So what jumped out at you in that document?
The fort, like they're really like impressed, like if they're gonna try to do better next time.
Okay, so where did you get that from?
I also got it from the book, like it said that.
Okay, but for this right here, you're focusing on this document. Okay, just this one. So you should be having a conversation about what observations you made from this document. Jason, what jumped out at you?
The fort thing.
What about it?
That the same thing that was in this book. That what the guy said. That the army.
What did he say?
He said that the Americans built something that his army would have built in a month.
Okay, so where does it say that in this text?
Right here.
Read it for me.
Let's see where this sentence start. Captain Knowlton of Ashford with 400 of paid forces immediately repaired to and pulled up a post and rail fence and carried the posts and rails to another fence, put them together for breastwork.
Okay, so what did he make the fort out of?
Logs and dirt and
Fences, right? He was going through and pulling fences out of the ground to make this fort. So when he talks about where was it? Posts and rails. Those are the heavy things that the fences are attached to. So like every 6 feet or so, there's a thick post in the cement.
So the British did that? No, the Americans did that.
Yeah, and then the rails are the top part of the fence that go through. Okay, so he's going through and he's having his forces, troops pull these fence posts and rails out of the ground to carry up this hill and make a fort. I think that is worthy of an observation, is how quickly and how they made it.
Wait, what are regulars, Americans?
Yeah, so absolutely write that down for your observation. Okay, so what are we looking at right now? No, we're right here. Not here, right here. So what observations can you make about the document? So what are some things that jumped out at you when you were reading this document?
It's almost like the same thing in the book and George.
So you think this document is similar to what you read in the social studies text and the King George document? Write that down.
This document isn't as much as these 2 pages.
What do you mean?
Like, this document is only like 3 paragraphs, and then right here is like 2 pages, and then the back is another.
Okay, so do you think there's more information in the social studies text or more information in that first document? Why?
It has more written things and it has bigger paragraphs.
Okay, so, but what makes it different from that? You said they were similar.
Yeah, the thing that makes it different, it can show you views of pictures and it has like highlighted parts of it.
Okay, but when we're talking about perspective and we're talking about point of view, who wrote this? Or why was it written?
It was printed by Francis Bailey.
Right, but this document is telling us what? How it happened, what happened, all of those events. So how is this different than what's in that?
Because in that one it tells you, it shows you the pictures and it tells you a little bit of different things.
So you're saying this one has more facts and this one has more details?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much I think.
So this is just a factual, like this is what happened, when it happened, and how it happened. This is similar to that, but there's more details from the person writing it. I would write that down as an observation. Okay, what are we talking about?
We're talking about like one of this sounds like this one sounds like a British and this one sounds like an American.
Okay. So we're focusing on document number 1 now, right?
This
First
one
thing,
is
what
American, this
observations
one's British.
can you make about the document?
You can tell because
So when you read document number 1,
what about this one?
what jumped out at you? What were some things that you noticed?
This one is
That there
British.
were,
Something like that. Why does it seem like
I think this one is American because it's called, it says how the British are like doing their things and stuff.
But you should read this one. Yeah, because it says all the work that they did, the Americans, and then right here it says all the work that the British
What
did.
jumped out at you when you read
He's
this?
explaining what they did.
You have something highlighted.
So this turn was alarmed on the second turn.
How do you know that an American wrote it based on that?
Of day by
The enemy got that our men got
Execution. So how does that lead you to believe that this is written by an American? What word makes you think that this is an American writing? Why?
because this is like if this American talk about, but it sounds like a British because why would American call themselves a rebel?
They were rebelling against the British king. So, but you have this sentence highlighted. At the words being given, the enemy fell surprisingly. What stands out as being
That the Americans probably won
so enemy is what's causing you to think this is written by an American. Okay? So how can we write that in your organizer as far as what observations can you make about this document? As who? Who is the enemy?
this one.
Okay, so write that down as your observation.
This one talks about
Try to come up with a couple different things that you know
This
just
one
kind of
talks
jumped
about-
out at you as you read this. It could be
the British.
words that were
like
used in
right
the
here,
text.
about
It could
the
be
enemy.
the tone of the passage, things that were reported, things that were not reported. Okay.
Yeah, because when I read this, I was given took out some important things, and the only important stuff that I took out was separating and ending.
What'd you observe?
That's why the conversation is really important with your group. All right, where are we?
We just finished talking about
Okay. So you want to figure out which side, which one is which before you start getting into it. Okay? And what did you decide? Okay, so this is the American perspective and this is a British perspective. Okay? Okay. Okay. And what makes you think this one is the British perspective?
Well, because if you think this one is American, then this one might be British because it said that it was American.
Might be, but are you 100% sure that this one is from a British perspective? Or have you just been focusing on document 1 right now? Okay, so you should be able to fill out the perspective right here, right? But what were some things that jumped out at you? What were some observations that you made about that document that could have led you to think that this was from the perspective of an American?
most part of it, but not like all of it. So like half.
Okay.
Probably like more than half.
It's in like the whole story.
Okay.
It's probably like this much than that.
So can you put that down as some observations that you made? The fact that it talked about the Connecticut troops, how it described the building of the fort. Can you put that down? Okay, so put that down. Write those down. 'Cause those are all of these observations are helping you kind of figure out the rest of this organizer. Okay. Okay, so where are we? We should, okay, so we're talking about this right here. What observations can you make about the document? So what observations have you made about this document? Okay. And what can you do with that information?
We could tell that. Okay, so we need to write it from a British.
Okay. It looked a lot like a British wrote it. Why? Some powerful language in there, isn't it? Okay. This action has shown the bravery of the king's troops, right? How brave and awesome and, you know. Okay, and so what, is there anything in the first document that can help you figure out? So you started with the second document? Because it's shorter. Okay, but what, I think that's important to note in that first box on this page, because that's that document right here. What are some what observations can you make about the document? Okay, this box here helps you to answer the other boxes down here. Things that jump out at you, things that, oh yeah, well that would explain why, you know. So you guys already think this is a British perspective. Okay, I would write that down, and I would write down the reason that you just gave me.
Did you read this paper?
From whose perspective?
What observation can we make about the read the paragraph. You read it? It's 3 against 1.
Okay, what?
What observation can you make about the document? What? It's like saying.
So you think it's from a British perspective, tell me why. And then Andrea, I think that what you said, the fact that you guys highlighted that sentence where it said this document shows the bravery, you can add that in your observations, because that helped you figure out whose perspective it was.
Like what the British did.
So from whose perspective, who's telling this? Is it a British perspective or a Patriot perspective? Okay, so I think that,
You are going ahead.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
No, you're going ahead.
Okay, so what?
you can write British perspective, let's use that vocabulary.
I think it was in the
First one? Well, it says what happened to both, like what they did.
So if you guys think that this is the perspective of a British soldier, what in that document leads you to believe that? Okay, why? Go back in that text and pull out some things that are going to...
Because he was here, it said that about, it said about an American.
So did this document only talk about how many British troops were killed? In the second document?
Well, then it doesn't say it.
Okay, so it says what happened to the both of them?
You reading that last sentence on the third paragraph? About 170 of the king's troops were killed. and since dead of their wounds, and a great many were wounded. They talk about how many. That's something that jumped out at you. That was an observation that you made. That would go in this box right here. How the document only talked about how many were wounded on the king's side.
A patriot is an American soldier, and American is an American that are killed.
Okay, so where are we? Okay. Okay. So how can you figure out whose perspective it is?
I think it can tell the side. And it says that
So when you've read this a couple of times and you've heard it read to you, you have heard it twice, you've heard it once. There's things in there that lead us to believe that this is either written from an American perspective, the words and the phrases and the things that they are writing about, is that showing an American side of the battle, or is it showing a British side of the battle? Okay, so what in here? So is that what you're saying? You think this is from an American perspective? Okay. What in here leads you to believe that it's an American perspective?
This one? It says Boston, January 2017. This town was. I think it's right
Okay,
here.
let's go back to the first document. This is what we're focusing on right here. You're trying to figure out whose perspective. Okay, so what were you going to say?
Because right here says when the enemy returned to Bunker's Hill and the provincials to Winter's Hill. So I think they're in American.
Okay, so where did you read that so he can find it?
Right here. Under the word slaughter. What's slaughter?
It's a city.
Slaughter right here.
The enemy, where were you?
When the enemy
Returned to Bunker's Hill and the provincials to Winter's Hill. So who are the provincials?
the Americans.
Right, okay, so when the enemy returned to Bunker's Hill and the Americans to Winter's Hill,
What? Did you leave his hand? It was here.
because it says till it says how
hi.
Hi, my name is
Yeah, no, they need to be back here. Yes, thank you. Bye. Okay, so what in that sentence helps you figure out that it's an American perspective?
Because it says when the enemy returned to Bunker's Hill, it didn't say anything, but then it said and the provincials went to Winter's Hill.
Okay,
So the British are the enemy.
perfect. Write that down. That's your proof. That's your evidence from the text. Are we arguing? What are we arguing about?
when they're commanded to shoot.
Okay, I don't think right now it's not necessary to figure out if he was in it or not. You're just trying to figure out whose perspective it is. Okay, well, read the question. From whose perspective is the document written? Is the perspective from a British
You're supposed to do this.
soldier or a British person, or is it from a patriot soldier or somebody who was witnessing it, or okay, but what do you think? What was your discussion? Whose perspective is this from? American or okay, who is he?
I can still play.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
But I'm gonna give the 5 to Stella because she's
Who's a spectator? What's a spectator?
The first we have
Somebody who watches. Okay. So was he in the battle?
no.
No, he was watching from afar, right? On Winter's Hill during the whole action. He watched everything.
They were complaining to me because it was 3 against me.
Okay. So you know who wrote it. You know where he was when he wrote it. So what in the text leads you to believe that he is an American spectator?
Because like
There has to be words and phrases that he uses in the text to help you guys make that argument.
Like, it seems that he was an American because he was watching the Americans, and he was if it was a British, he would tell the British what he was doing.
Okay, but let's go back and find evidence in the text that helps us figure out if he was an American or if he was British.
That when Mr. Carlin was shooting each other, they were separating.
You guys are through, make sure you tell me why. Are we on the second one?
Yeah.
Okay, let's regroup here just briefly. Most of us are on finishing up the second one or moving on to the third. So, the first question helps you start figuring out the other questions. It's those things that jump out at you, those things that you go, oh wow, or oh, that's interesting, or wow, that sounds very similar to something else I read earlier this week. Okay, so your observations of, okay, and I'm just talking about this document. I know some of you kind of had them side by side and you were looking at different things and you wanted to figure out whose perspective was which to begin with. That's fine, but for right now I'm just talking about document number 1. What were some things that jumped out at you? Emily?
It kept saying enemy.
So it kept using the word enemy. Okay, so it was one thing that she wrote down was the fact that the term enemy was used consistently throughout this document. Jason?
That he made his troops pull fences out of the ground to make the fort.
Okay, why did that jump out at you?
Because, he made them, pull stuff out of the ground to make that huge fort.
Okay. What else jumped out at you in this document? You guys had a good one. What did you have?
First one. Like you were saying. Stop. When I became his place, where it was American. The first thing he told me surprise on this.
That the perspective of Francis Bailey's summary, it doesn't tell who wrote it, it just tells who printed it, so it's from an American because it says when the enemy returned to Bunkers Hill and the provincials to Winters Hill. The British went to Bunkers Hill and the Americans went to Winters Hill, so it means that it's an American who's saying it.
Okay, and so your conversation was that who do you think enemy refers to?
As the British.
Okay. So those observations are going to help you figure out whose perspective this document is from. And that's having a conversation with group 3. It doesn't really matter if it's an American soldier or an American citizen during that time, or if it was a British soldier or a British citizen living in the colonies during that time. Okay? You're trying to figure out whose eyes is this being told through. And when those observations jump out at you, like the fence, ripping the fence rails and the posts out of the ground to build that fortification, what does that tell you about the perspective of this document? Whose perspective is it?
The American.
How do we know that?
Because it's building a fort so they won't get inside so easily.
Okay, and who built the fort?
The American.
And how do we know that?
Because it said the British were being lazy
Well, while they were building the fort, the British were
Sleeping.
sleeping.
Okay, where did you get that information from? It didn't come from the document.
It came from the social studies. From the social studies.
So King George.
Okay, so from the video and the social studies text and the King George document, you know that the Americans were the one who built that fort on Bunkers Hill. So using that information and the fact that this document talks about how the general was having his troops pull out the fence rails and the posts, you now know that this is from an American perspective. Right? Safe to say. True? So those observations that you're making, those all help you form that opinion. Well, this is why I think this is an American perspective. Because you're using your background knowledge and you're using this evidence from the text to help you figure out who is telling this side or piece of the story. Okay? Let's work on the second two. Okay? You should be able to do those pretty quickly and move on to the second one. Okay? Go. Yeah, you're going to have to give me something. So what evidence in that document is going to tell you that this is from an American perspective? And we talked about some of them.
The one that got into
We don't think it tells half of it and most of it, so can we put like, no, we don't think it tells every part of it.
So you don't think it tells every side, everything about the battle, start to finish. Okay?
We don't think it's gonna be half of it or every part of it. We think it's most of it, but can we use most of it? Not one of these.
So does it tell the complete story of the battle? Only a piece of it?
Or a side.
Or a side?
The document, it tells a side.
It only tells a side. Whose side?
The Americans.
How do you know?
Because I've read it and I've read all of them and it really pretty much just the Americans talking about the British. It doesn't tell exactly what happened.
Okay, so I would use that. So does it tell the complete story? A piece or a side? It tells just a side, and whose side does it tell? The Americans. And then you're gonna have to tell me what's missing.
It says how they kind of shot through. It says how they paid the forward. It says about the British with
Okay, so you're looking at one. What do you guys think? Does it tell the whole story? A piece of it? Or just one side? Why? Okay. Well, if you're saying that the British side is missing, then does this document tell the whole story? If you're saying that the British side is missing, then I don't know if it could be the complete story. If you're saying there's a side missing.
Just a piece. Because
A side.
a side, because it's half and half.
And you guys have to figure that. I don't know. You have to decide.
A side. As a piece would be just. Yes.
Yeah, but what
To save more ammo, they should have gone around the hill so when people
It tells.
they won't just have to be shot.
Okay, so what part of our organizer are we discussing right now?
Oh yeah. It tells this.
Okay, so you're saying that this is only showing a piece of it? Okay.
The things.
Started the battle.
So what's missing?
They did. And all that happened. Do you do number 2?
Okay, that needs to be written in your
Right here
written
you have to
down. And
write
if it's only a piece,
Francis
then tell me
Bailey's.
what's missing.
It's spelled right here. Print. Write his name and then write print.
So you
Don't
start
write
are you
summary.
starting with Okay, so you said you think it only shows a piece of the battle? Why? You think what? So you think it's one-sided, and everybody else in your group thinks it's just a piece.
Francis Bailey's print.
Why? Okay. Okay. It's your opinion. If you can back it up with evidence, then that's what you're going to have to write down. Okay. If you think one way and the rest of your group thinks a different way, that's fine. But both pieces have to be backed up with evidence from the text. So if she thinks it's only showing it's a very one-sided view, you gotta tell me why and then what's missing. If you guys think it's just a piece of it,
When they're like this,
you have to tell me why and what's missing.
there's people up here. There's people up here.
So,
Yeah, and they've been looking at it. Yeah, they
what
were
did you
just coming up
decide?
from
To tell the complete story?
And they knew that they were
A
gonna
piece or a side of it?
from like the bottom. They should have gone around.
Okay,
So
why?
when they went around, they were shooting. They would send like 4 people. 4 more people, and they would die.
No,
And
the
they would all be
commander,
shooting.
Why don't you just, Carlos,
Shelly,
why don't you just move that to a different spot?
stop going up.
Like to a different table if it's gonna keep falling.
That's why they kept on dying.
Or on the
Yeah,
floor.
that's why they died. They like were like
Why do you think it's a piece?
only they were 9.
Yes, because if they went around, they wouldn't just shot at one person. I think they had to shoot at others.
Yeah, instead of like
Okay, so do you think it's showing a piece of the battle or is that a one-sided view?
they would have
Okay, so if it's only talking about one side,
They knew they did like all the trees.
whose side is missing?
All my men.
Right, cool. Get those written and move on to the second one.
And then they were like go around. Looks like they're coming up from the front or something from the back. But they shoot and what happens goes
But this is like all the this is why you did right here. You have to write that down.
Guys, we need to do this. Are you done with the first one? Okay, so
kept them going up in a straight line. Okay, so
piece, complete story, the whole battle. What? Is it a piece of the battle, the complete story, or just one-sided?
It was.
Do you think it gives the whole story, start to finish?
yeah.
You don't think so? Why? You don't have to agree with your group. Okay, so why don't you think so?
Like I kind of agree with it because like here you know they showed us that you know how you showed us the she said that she's gonna release this and discussing it said that if he got injured in his hand.
Okay. So you're linking the picture to this document?
Yeah.
Okay. So you three are saying, you're not sure, but you three are saying this tells the complete story. What evidence tells the complete story?
Okay, then. We need to do what piece is missing.
They did not show the.
They didn't show the end.
Bill.
Well, it did, but it didn't show the end. It just said how many were killed in that sense.
But it tells.
Okay.
Does it tell? Yeah, it tells what happened at the end.
Okay.
And it also told about the person that got wounded in the hand.
Okay.
Like in the
It
picture,
said it was Lieutenant Grassbender.
Okay.
because in the picture it shows that the bandana or something like that is going through his hand in the picture right there. So it says that the general got wounded in the hand, which we think.
Okay, and then is that, you have to be able to defend that answer. And there's nothing missing.
No.
Okay, so move on to document 2.
Just wait.
So what do we decide? whole part side? Yeah, all three?
So is this gonna be the map of Boston? No, because we're doing this one. Aren't we? Or wait. Are we doing the? We're not doing the map. We're doing this, right?
Yeah.
We're doing this one. When we move on to this one, she's gonna give us a different paper.
Okay, so you need to fill out what's missing and move on to document 2. We're moving on to the next document?
You did too.
Okay.
You should know.
That's fine, you can fill it out.
That's like being crazy.
With the little black.
Are we on number 2?
Let's read this. Let's read this.
Okay, let's regroup very quickly here for the first document. Most of you are moving on to document number 2. The third question was, does this story tell the complete story of the battle? Does it tell just a piece of it, or does it tell just one side?
A side. One side.
Okay, who thinks it tells the whole story? Okay, who thinks it tells just a piece of it? And who thinks it's one-sided? Interesting. Group 5. Why do you think this document tells the complete story? Give me some of your reasons why.
Read what you wrote. Okay. Observation.
Yeah, read it.
I'm trying to get you guys to have a discussion about this because we've got three different thoughts going on here. Some of you think it tells the whole story start to finish. Some of you think that, you know what, I think it only tells a little piece of it. There's a whole lot missing. And some of you think that it's very much one-sided. So I want to start the conversation with group 5 and have the rest of you agree or disagree and kind of figure out, are you strong in your belief that this is what I think, or is someone going to be able to kind of sway you a little bit? Jocelyn?
I think it tells the whole story because
Group 5, convince me that this tells the whole story. What makes you think that this tells the whole story?
Because Connecticut.
I can't hear you, Charlotte, with your hands in front of your face.
just say it.
You got the longest word.
No, it's the same thing except I write bigger.
So, group 5, here's the problem. If you can't defend it, then I'm not sure if it's a strong, if it's a strong enough argument.
I started that.
It's
Okay, group 3, what do you think?
This is the thing.
Group 5, you might want to listen, please.
It tells you about like that they made a fort and what the American plans were, but it didn't tell you anything about the British.
Okay, did you guys hear what group 3 said? So you guys think it's one-sided because it's very much talking about the Americans' plans, what they did. Okay, what was missing for you?
What the British planned.
What the British were doing.
Yeah.
So they felt it was a one-sided perspective. Okay, group 2, what did you think?
Like we thought that it was only like a piece, like pieces here and there, because like it did talk about the fort and all that, and it was saying about like the British, how they were told like to like go up the mountain, but since they kept coming back, that they kept sending them up. And like we thought that we also thought it because like it was saying about the fort, and it was saying about like how many soldiers were killed or wounded, but it wasn't really saying about how if they fled and how the Americans or British felt.
Okay, so you think there was bits and pieces of the battle, more from an American perspective than there were some things missing from the British side, some information on the British, okay? Marty, what did you guys think about that first document?
Thought that it was a side of it,
A side of it. Whose side?
the American,
Why?
because it didn't really talk about the British.
Okay, so didn't talk about the British. So group 5. What did you feel? I can't hear you. What?
Whole story because it says how the Connecticut troops helped the provincials, so the Patriots, and how the orders were given to the British to put in fresh troops to exchange them with the 2-hour troops that were already there, to trade them with fresh troops, so that the other ones that were there for 2 hours to rest. And
So because of the detail of the battle and the troops that were coming in and the troops that were being replaced, you think it gives a more accurate description of the entire battle?
And also how it says that the British were kind of going in, attacking and stuff, and how they got out of Boston to Charlestown to investigate, and then they were firing at 10 different locations at the
Okay,
fort.
so the fact that it was talking about what the British did as they marched through Boston
Yeah.
helps to kind of build that picture that it's a complete story.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to document 2. Should go much faster.
I would say it says both.
The thing that we talked about was that the British went inside of Boston and fired at once.
Was that in this document, they would always say enemies instead of say the British or the Americans. They would say enemies.
That was on the other document, wasn't it?
So what jumped out from this document?
It jumped out on me was that they went to, it's like if they were jealous of Americans, because they went out and they fired at once.
Who did?
It was the
Where?
British. It says right here. It says this town was alarmed on the 17th instant a break of a day by a firing from lively ship of war.
Okay, who was firing?
The British,
How do you know?
because and reporting immediately the spread that the rebels had broke ground
Okay, broke ground on what? What were they doing?
and were raising Boston.
Okay, so what were they breaking ground and building?
The boats, no,
The fort,
cannon.
right?
Yeah.
By a firing from the lively ship of war, you just said that was a British ship firing, right? And a report was immediately spread that the rebels had broke ground.
Yeah, so they went on the side of the Americans of Boston.
Because the British were by water and the Americans were on land.
Exactly. So write that down.
The town was alarmed on the.
Okay, so we should be finishing this one and we should be moving on to this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
One observation I can make is that the British were in the boats.
So what jumped out at you? What were some observations that you made about that
The
document?
British.
The first one.
Firing first because the British were the ones who were by water and the Patriots were by on ground.
The British were the ones who fired first.
By water, yeah.
Angel, go get some water.
The British were.
Okay, why?
Because it shows really well. The captain tells them to not fight.
Where have you heard that before?
From the
Yeah, so wouldn't that be something that might jump out at you? That you're reading something that sounds very similar to what you've read? Okay, I would write that down as an observation. And did you guys decide on the perspective of this yet? Whose perspective it is?
I drink too much.
Did you decide on that? Yeah. Who is it? Decide. Whose perspective is it?
Let me see, I'll get you one.
Okay.
Go
Based
get you
off
one.
of those observations. Okay.
We already observed that the town was alarmed and that it was alarmed by a firing lively ship that was immediately spread by the rebels.
Okay. So, by a firing from the lively ship of war. So, who had the ships during this time? Who was firing from the ships?
The ship of war.
Which side had the ships?
The rebels.
So the rebels were shooting at themselves from the water. Okay, who had the ships? Who had the navy? The British Navy, right? Okay, they were the ones firing from the ships towards Boston, right? Okay, so we're good there. And a report was immediately spread that the rebels had broke ground and were raising a battery. What were they doing?
They were getting weapons. So they
What?
were like.
They were, say it louder. They were building their fort, right? So the ships were firing, and there was a report that came that they are building a fort. They're, they've taken the hill that we wanted. So you've got that marked. That's something that jumped out at you. Okay, they're raising a battery. They were raising that fortification of.
So they built a fort and they put like a stash of guns and.
Absolutely, they were building the fort to defend it. Absolutely. Yeah, so that jumped out at you. So that should be written in your observations. That ships were firing, the Americans were building that fort, and then what you just said, Carlos, that they were supplying it with what?
With weapons and ammunition.
Martine?
Miss Price, isn't like that picture like inside in the textbook or is it the other thing?
Which picture?
The picture of Kim and the
What about it?
If she said that if isn't it like when they're building the fort?
That was after.
Oh.
That was after.
He kind of didn't that guy see what happened and then he kind of got into like his
So it was before
mind.
they had cameras. It was a snapshot of what he thought was important to capture during that time.
Yeah, so he just
Okay, so what else jumped out at you? The ships were firing.
The ships.
You said what they were doing. What were they building?
The ships were firing and the things that the Americans were building the fort.
Right. Anything else jump out at you? Just leave it on. Just put it on the floor, please. Anything else jump out?
Building the fort.
oh shoot, that's number one.
Yeah, stick with number 2.
The troops, there was some armed vessels, and when the troops formed, the troops formed when they landed from the armed vessels. And
Okay, so who are they talking about right there?
the British.
Yeah. Coming from where? Seriously?
From Boston.
Where were they coming from?
From
You just said where they were coming
Britain.
from. But what were they just on?
Our
The
vessel.
ships. So they left their ships and came onto land. Okay, now let's move on to the perspective. Whose perspective is this document?
British.
Yeah, how do you know?
Because it's mostly talking about them.
Mm-hmm. How do you know?
What about what?
That's their perspective.
Because it says how they were defending themselves.
Okay, and whose perspective is this? Americans. They were rebelling against.
then it's British.
Are you trying to figure out perspective?
Because it's
Whose perspective is it?
the definition for regulars is
Oh,
British.
we're not looking at that one. You're talking regulars and rebels. Those are two different things. Regulars and rebels are not the same word.
Yeah, but isn't regulars
Regulars are British. So
This is talking about rebels.
so
The rebels upon the heights were perceived to be in great force and strongly posted.
so it was a British.
so the
So
British
whose perspective is, yeah. It's a pretty heavy British perspective, isn't it?
So should we
Okay,
put
just leave
that
it on the
Americans
floor,
were in boats?
Dora, have a seat. Put that on the floor if it's not going to fit. Why?
Didn't show.
Andrea, did you talk about that last sentence?
Which one?
Oh, you're on the first one, aren't you? You're on the
Yeah.
first- Okay. So, whose perspective do you think this one is from?
It was an American.
Why? How do you know?
Could I have to talk more about the American fact? It does talk about the British, but mostly the American.
Okay, write that down. So whose perspective is the second
I
document?
think
How do you know?
because it's just saying like that the Americans were like that it's just making them sound guilty, like that they were all firing upon them and all that.
Bring that up at discussion. Bring that up.
What did you say? What did you say?
Oh, we're done.
How was
Okay, tell me why you think it's British, and tell me why you think it's a piece.
Because the war is missing, and what did the Americans do about it?
Okay.
And British, because it says that the troops sworn as landed the rebels upon the heights.
What's missing?
The war.
Like, what did the Americans do about it? Did they fire back?
So you think it's just a piece? You think this is a very small piece of it?
Small piece.
Who looks really good in this document?
The Americans.
They do?
Yeah, because it
They
says
look really good in this document? He's British.
because it's saying British is saying the British did this.
And that, and how great we were. And yeah, so who looks really good in this document?
The British.
The British.
Yeah, don't they?
Yeah, but the Americans look like really poor, like.
Well, they are.
But like in the
Okay.
exaggerated.
When you're done with that, you can move on to the map of Boston, which is on page 290 and 291, and it's in your King George text.
Yeah.
Oh, we're done already. So let's move on.
Why?
in this one? Like the Americans don't call themselves rebels, so it must be the British.
It must be the British because they're calling them rebels, right? And what were they doing when they were breaking ground? Did you figure that out?
They took out the fence posts and all of that from the
Ran up the hill.
Exactly. So there's your evidence is that you think it's British because they're calling the
Out of nowhere, I just
rebels.
thought something dumb. Because I thought that, because you know how they shot a cannon?
Uh-huh.
And it made it look obvious. And it blew the head guy off. From the other one's like, so I thought it was going to be the British.
Oh well, that cannon was fired from the British, but they both had them.
You just started laughing because we were out of it.
Okay, so put that down and move on to the last two.
Okay. British because they...
We think that the story is a piece of it.
Why?
What do you think? It's a side.
He said
And that's fine. He can think it's a side, and you guys can think it's a piece of it. But you've got to be able to explain why you think it's just a piece or you think it's just a side of it.
I think it's just a side because for me it didn't really show much about the Americans.
I think it's a piece because it's
Well, is it the side of it or is it the piece of the back?
it's
Okay. What's missing?
Why do you think a piece? So you're saying it's like one little part of it?
Okay, so I write that down. What are you putting here?
one side.
So you think it's one-sided. Why?
Because it talks about the British.
Are we looking at this document right here? So you're telling me it's from American perspective. And you're telling me you think this is one-sided.
No, Americans.
What?
Americans.
This is an American's perspective, right? But do you think it tells the whole story?
No.
A piece of it? Or one side?
One side.
Okay. All right, one side. You gotta tell me why. Why do you think it's one-sided?
Because it talks about the British.
Well, if it's an American perspective, wouldn't we be talking about the Americans? I'm just asking, this is what you have written down. You think it's from an American perspective. You think it only tells one side. So what side are we missing? Why?
Why do you guys think it's a side?
Because why? And what they did?
I think it's a side because it's telling what the British said, not what the Americans said.
Let's go.
It's not a piece of the British. It's a side that the British.
Oh, we have to write this.
okay. So here's the map.
Oh my gosh, I keep on writing American logos.
All right, so let's regroup here and talk about this second document. What were some things that jumped out at you after reading this document? Some things that you found interesting.
They fired on the Americans, like they were on the Breeds Hills, and the British shot from their boats to the Breeds Hill.
Okay, so there was already an attack going on.
Yeah.
So that jumped out at you. There was an attack already happening, and the attack was happening from the British ships that were out in the harbor. Okay, what else jumped out at you from this passage? Andrea, we're on that second document, and you highlighted that last sentence. Why? That's I think it's my favorite out of the whole thing. You highlighted that last sentence. Why? Can you read it?
About 170 of the
No, right here. This one.
This action has shown the bravery of the king's troops who, under every disadvantage, gained a complete victory over 3 times the number, strongly posted and covered by the breastworks. But they fought for the king, their laws, and the Constitution.
Why did you highlight that?
Because it's talking about how brave the British was, even though they were the ones that won, but most of them were killed than the rebels.
That part was missing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But why did you think that was funny? I think that last line's hysterical, just because we know so much background history on it. But why? Why did you think it was funny?
Because it's all making them sound like all tough and all that. If there was more British soldiers killed than Americans.
Yeah, it's making them sound kind of like we
And
thought it was
dumb.
like we won the battle against 400, and then they killed almost 1,000.
Okay, so I think it's a really good point. It makes them sound like, oh, look at us, look how great we were. We were totally outnumbered. But we know for a fact that who had more troops?
The British.
The British had more troops, right?
So,
And more were
so it would be
And more were killed, right?
yeah. So
Okay.
Like it wouldn't be funny if I was talking about the Americans, but they didn't fight them.
So this action has shown the bravery of the king's troops, right?
Yeah.
Who under every disadvantage, what does that mean?
Like that, they had it makes it sound like they didn't have more people, that they were like this.
Doesn't that kind of jump out at you? Under every disadvantage. Makes it sound like, oh, we just didn't have enough troops, or we didn't have enough ammunition, or we didn't have enough this, or we didn't have enough that, Angel. Right?
Yeah.
Gained a complete victory over 3 times their number, strongly posted and covered by breastworks, but they fought for their king, their laws, and constitution.
But they weren't the ones that were outnumbered. The Americans were.
They weren't the ones who were outnumbered. Who was outnumbered?
The Americans.
The Americans were outnumbered. And from that paragraph alone, okay, we should be able to figure out whose perspective this document is from.
British.
It's definitely a British perspective. Okay? Does this tell the complete story of the battle?
No.
A side. Whole British.
One side
Yes.
or a piece?
Side.
Yeah, it's only saying like how the Americans were like all like firing upon them and it's making them all sound like all guilty.
It's a stop. Making sound who guilty?
The Americans.
Okay, so it kind of paints the Americans in a bad light a little bit. Okay? Yeah, I don't think it tells the whole story.
Nope.
No. It has a piece.
You're gonna have to figure that out. If it tells just a piece of it, or if it just tells a very, a one-sided version of what happened. And if it is one-sided, is it a truthful one-sided piece of information?
No.
Nope.
I mean, they lost heavily. They lost a lot of men in this battle, right?
Yeah.
Does that mention that in here?
No.
No.
They're just saying what's good about it.
Yeah, they just want to say about how they're like boasting about themselves.
It kind of sounds like that. Ooh, yeah, look at us. We were so great. We just, won this battle, and we were totally outnumbered, and they had us, but we won at the end, right? Right.
I give the British a short off because they won.
And why did they win?
Because they had more troops. And they had more ammunition.
They had more ammunition and they had more troops. But this made it sound like
They were disadvantaged.
that they were at a disadvantage. Hey, we didn't have that many troops. We didn't have that much ammunition, and we still won. Okay? So being able to look at both of those sides and both of those perspectives, you're able to pull out, okay, why would they write this? Right? Why would they write it? And what are some of your thoughts? Why do you think this one was written how it was written? Why do you think this one said the things that it said?
Maybe to try to get to not let the Americans like stay in the colonies type thing.
Okay, Carlos, what were you gonna say?
Maybe because maybe the British soldier that wrote this document probably wanted to boast about himself, like it was probably his diary or something, and he wanted to probably boast how well they did.
Why? Why would you want to boast about something? Granted, they won,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why would he want to make it a boastful thing?
Maybe he wanted to. Maybe it wasn't a diary. Maybe it was a letter to a guy, like a general or something, or his king, and he wanted to kind of impress him.
Okay, so maybe to impress someone, maybe to please somebody. Who had the confidence after this war? After this battle, who had the confidence? The Americans. So, is it possible that this was written to kind of boost the confidence of
The British.
British generals, maybe a little bit? Like, hey, we were totally outnumbered, but you know what? We totally won this battle. Okay? They had more guns, they had more people, but you know what? We fought, we were brave, we did, fought for the king, and we won this battle. It paints them in a much better light, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, by the way, we lost over 1,000 men. They had less men, they had less ammo, and they killed more of us than we did of them. Which one sounds better?
The second
If you're a British soldier, which one sounds better? We beat them at a disadvantage, or they destroyed us? We beat them, right? That's going to sound a little bit better when you're trying to report the events of the battle. True? True. Okay. So, our last section is this map of Boston. But what I want you to do before we get ready to sort of wrap up here is you're taking all of this information. You're taking everything that you've been reading, the two perspectives today. Then the map's going to help you out a little bit with this. But it's mainly the texts that are helping you to make a decision about what really happened at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Think about what you read in your social studies text. Think about what you read in the King George excerpt. Think about the video that you watched. Think about the painting that we studied. And think about these two perspectives that we just spent a lot of time working through. What really happened at this battle? Describe the events as you saw them as either an American or British soldier. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you, I'm going to give you a sheet of lined paper, and I just want you to make a T-chart, make two sides. Okay, one side is an American perspective, and one side is a British perspective. And I just want you to brainstorm all of the different things that you have learned about and read about and talked about as far as the events that happened from the American perspective and a British perspective. Again, you don't know whose side you're writing for right now. Okay? So in order to write from an American, what happened as an American, you have to kind of understand what happened to the British, right? And to write from as a British soldier, you have to understand also what was happening on the American side. Okay? So thinking about all of those things, this is going to be a quick brainstorm before we go to lunch. Think about the events. Think about all the things that you have read. Make your T-chart. All right. If I was an American soldier, these are the things that happened. If I was a British soldier, these are the things that happened. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. I'll get you paper. Make a little space for you to write.
American. Because I am American. And I thought you were black. I thought you were like a African American. Both.
Okay, make your T-chart. One side is American, one side is British. You can fold it or you can make a line, doesn't matter. Okay, start your brainstorm.
We think that we should be British because
You were a British soldier.
Than the British.
How would you report the events of that battle?
I think we should be American because Americans have more evidence.
Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just draw a line and draw a line. Start your brainstorm.
I think we.
Okay, you should be writing at this point. It's up on the board. How to make it.
You can write right here, American, and then on the bottom.
Okay, let's go. If you were an American soldier, how would you tell this tale? If you were a British soldier, what are the things you would say? You're going to be writing about it. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just make a T-chart. If you were an American fighting at the Battle of Bunker Hill, how would you describe the events of that battle? Let's use the lines here. Make a T-chart. Make a T-chart. Okay, if you were an American, how would you describe the events of the Battle of Bunker Hill? You should be spending more time writing how you would describe this. I'm drawing pictures up here at the top. You'd be writing, if you were an American, how would you describe the events of the Battle of Bunker Hill? Not what you would do, how would you describe what happened? They weren't outnumbered. They weren't outnumbered. Frantically writing, which is good. So give me some things for the American. What would an American soldier say? Just bloody fight. What else?
They were disadvantaged.
What?
They were disadvantaged.
A good fight.
A good fight.
What do you mean, Emily, that they were at a disadvantage?
Like the British had more of everything. They had better armor. They had better weapons. They had more soldiers, and like they had more ammunition.
Okay, if you don't have this, you can steal these ideas. Okay? I'll put etc. Okay? Martine. Put your hand up, or are you just kind of stretching? Okay, what else would we say? If you were an American, how would you describe the Battle of Bunker Hill? Goodness gracious, what happened the night before?
They built a fort.
They built a fort
We built a fort.
Yeah, with the British.
overnight, right? From old fences. Give me one more.
The British attacked, like they went through his cannon, where
Shot
they,
cannons.
Shot cannons.
The Americans kind of ambushed them.
Yeah.
Ambush? Americans did an ambush.
Okay, what about the British? If you were reporting the events of this fight from the British perspective, just shout them out to me.
We
Fight? Better fight?
Death, guns.
more
Try to
ammo.
keep the colonies under the king's orders.
Okay, so try to control the colonies.
They outnumber them?
Wait, what?
Outnumbered. What else? The British woke up the next morning and what did they see?
A fort.
Would you want to say something about the fact that your general kept sending up troops,
Yeah.
right?
Horrible general? Like, was risking that? Was risking their life?
Was it a risky move?
Yeah. They should
Okay.
have gone around, like, surrounded the people.
Where were the British during this battle?
On the floor.
On the floor?
I mean, they were on the ground.
They were on the bottom of a hill, right?
Yeah.
Sniping.
Where were the Americans?
They were on top of the heap. They were on top. How did we die?
Definite advantage, right? I think someone said yesterday that the Americans had some good advice given by their general. What was that advice?
Don't fire until you see the lights of their eyes.
Okay, so they had some really good advice from their general. Right? Don't fire. Because if you're going to fire, you better make sure what's going to happen.
You hit something.
That you're going to hit something.
You're not gonna shoot.
Okay? All right, would you please put everything in your folders?